So I'm here specifically to speak on Bill C-21, an act to amend certain acts and to make certain consequential amendments in regards to firearms. And I want to start by thanking the member from Cowichan-Malahat-Langford for his hard work on this file. It is not an easy one, and these discussions are always rife with conflict as we try to navigate our way down this issue. I will say about this bill that I am ready to support it to committee. I am also recognizing that there's a lot of questions that I still have, and I'm hoping that the committee will be able to work through some of those questions to get me answers. Madam Speaker, I do represent a rural riding. I grew up in a household where several of my family members were legal gun owners. They followed the rules, and I was taught gun safety very young as a matter of respect. I grew up eating wild meat, and hunting was a significant part of my family's life. I have met with many legal gun owners in my riding who have talked about the frustration that they feel about the rules always focusing on them rather than addressing some of their legitimate concerns about illegal guns and how they get into our communities. And I think that's an important part of our conversation today, and it should continue to be. Those conversations do concern me greatly. My riding also has a high level of people retiring from the military who maintain their skills as a commitment to their years of service. And I think it's important for us to all recognize those who use firearms to protect and to serve our communities. And I've also heard from constituents who are very, very concerned about gun violence in their communities and in our region. There have been, sadly, several examples in my riding over the past few years, which has resulted in my office receiving more concerns about gun safety than we have ever seen before. This is especially concerning when it comes to cases of domestic violence where guns are used. In 2020, we know that 160 women and girls were killed in Canada. One woman or girl is killed every 2.5 days in this country. So as Canadians are seeing an increase in gun violence across our country, I believe that all Canadians do want to see this addressed. About 3 years ago, a constituent in my riding invited me to come to the shooting range with him. He wanted to showcase for me so that I would understand the rules and how he followed them. I agreed so that I could learn more about the realities of these folks living in my region. Of course, he was also a retired service member for the military, and I always take an opportunity to spend time with people who served us and served us so well. The first thing he told me is that I would have to come to his house and ride with him because he could not stop on the way through town to pick me up. The rules in Canada meant that he had to go straight from his home, not stopping for anything else, and go to the range. At his home, he was able to show me the way he stored his guns, separate from ammunition and with everything locked away and secured. He also showed me how he transported the guns and how that was done safely. And I learned a lot, and I really appreciated his effort to take that time to educate me. He also shared that he was concerned about the gun violence in Canada and what that did for him as a legal gun owner and as somebody who was really practicing safely. He knew things that had happened across the country, and he knew that people were more fearful. These are important conversations to have, especially at that community level where we can have those open conversations and discussions about how we can come together. He did feel that the majority of gun owners followed the rules very carefully, but he was also concerned that there are legal gun owners that don't always follow the rules, and he wanted to make sure that those issues were addressed. And of course was also very concerned about the fact that we do have illegal guns in this country and that those folks can really make a bad name for people who are doing their best to be safe. The facts are that in Canada, between 2019 and 2020, notable increases in rates of firearm violence crime have been reported, especially in places like southern rural British Columbia with an increase of 34%, the northern rural part of Ontario, 32% up, rural Alberta, 32% in the north and 31% in the south, and the Northwest Territories, which saw a 23% increase in Nova Scotia, 22%. Handguns were the most serious weapon present in most firearms-related violent crimes. So over my years of 7 years now, I have heard two things repeatedly from constituents. One is that we need to look at the gun policy in Canada and we must focus on illegal guns and how they get to our country. And two, we need more education with Canada about the strong rules that we do have and how they work in our country. And I believe these are important areas to have discussed. I also have heard a lot through this bill, specifically concerns from the airsoft community. Bill C-21 will prohibit imports, exports, sales, and transfers of all replica firearms, which would include airsoft guns that are designed or intended to look exactly to resemble a real firearm. This does concern me because there is the safety issue on the one side that we should consider carefully. We've heard of stories of people using these to emulate real guns, and that is a safety concern for all people that are involved in that situation. But we also hear the other side that it will impact paintball retailers and facilities, as most rely on income from both airsoft and paintball use. So I understand that in this country there are very few regulations in Canada, and I think it's something we need to look at. So we have heard from the sector that they have not been meaningfully consulted with, and we want to make sure that when we further the discussions, we can address that. But I have learned that people have successfully altered airsoft weapons to hold real ammunition. And this really surprised me, Madam Speaker. I had no idea that that was even possible, but unfortunately it is, and it is a growing concern. So we need to work with this sector to make sure that we look at the realities that they're facing and make sure the solution is workable so that they continue their practice and not have a huge impact on their income. But we also need to make sure that the safety of Canadians is addressed for sure. Illegal guns are a huge concern for my constituents, as I mentioned earlier, and this bill does not offer what I would like to see in terms of measures about smuggling guns. Madam Speaker, I represent the 19 Wing in Comox, and they do tremendous work on our coastline to keep our communities safe. And they have found people trying to ship things across our borders, whether it be guns or drugs, illegally, and they have stopped that. So I really appreciate their work, but I'm concerned that there is not going to be the amount of supports needed to continue that work and to expand that work. We know that this bill does increase the maximum penalty for trafficking, smuggling, and other firearms offenses from 10 years to 14 years. It requires the Commissioner of Firearms to give the Minister an annual report. It allows proactive information sharing between the RCMP and local law enforcement agencies for the purpose of investigating or prosecuting firearm trafficking offenses, and it also provides eligibility for wiretap on additional criminal code firearms offenses. But what it doesn't include in a meaningful way is more supports for the Canadian Border Service Agency. We know that under the previous government, the Conservative government, they cut over 1,000 positions. We know under this government, they've got some of those folks back, but definitely not the amount that are required to actually address the guns that are being smuggled into our country illegally. And we also know, as our leader wrote to the Prime Minister in 2018, that we need to see more changes within our policies in this country to support the root causes of gun violence in some of the more vulnerable communities. We need to address things like poverty. I know I was at an event just a few days ago in my community and was very surprised by how many people talked to me about the increasing homeless population, more and more people that are really struggling to make ends meet, and how they're often going towards violence because they can't feed themselves and they're not safe in their own area. So we need to make sure that there are supports that are provided to our communities to address these key issues, because the more poverty grows, the more disenfranchisement by so many people, the more violence is a result. And we need to look at these things as correlating members. So I'm here to discuss this. I hope that we all in this House have a meaningful conversation, because these things are important to our communities, and if we don't address them in an open and transparent way, it will lead to more conflict. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to speak today, and I look forward to answering my colleagues' questions.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The Honourable Member for Charlottetown.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and thank my colleague for her speech. I was particularly interested in her comments with respect to airsoft guns and the impact on that industry. It is an issue in my riding. I believe this is absolutely a good bill, but I think with respect to airsoft guns, quite frankly, it overreaches. The problem is this. An airsoft gun that is a replica of a gun that is not banned is banned. So we're banning toys. Does my honourable colleague have a concern about that? Is it something that she feels could be addressed through amendments at committee? Thank you.
The honourable member for North Island Powell River Briefe-Fencer. Thank you.
North Island Powell River, thank you so much, Madam Speaker. And I thank the member who I spent a lot of time with in committee with and appreciate always his feedback and his thoughts. And I, in this case, completely agree with him. These are very important questions because we know that there's a lot of industries that use airsoft and it's a toy, it's something that people play with, but if it's used in the wrong hands, either changed so that it can actually shoot or used to replicate something, that is concerning. So I think we have to look within our committee to do their work to make sure that they offer a workable solution so that we can protect the industry but make sure that we keep our communities safe at the same time. And that's why it's so important that we come together on this bill and have meaningful dialogue, because these are really life and death situations in some cases, both in terms of economics and in terms of safety.